All right, welcome everybody. So this week's episode on our podcast is about loneliness. So I know past COVID, most of us have experienced loneliness in one way due to isolation, other things. Do you think?
Definitely.
Yeah, do you think it's loneliness has been around for a while, or do you think it was a big contributing factor of the pandemic?
I honestly feel like we had already been probably coping with a lot of loneliness. Well, not coping, but enduring a lot of loneliness without really being aware that that's what was happening. I think a lot of times we associate how bad we're feeling with like, oh, I'm anxious or oh, I'm depressed. Like I just been in a rut and feeling really low lately, and we don't stop to think like, okay, like what are my social connections? How when's the last time I spoke to a friend? I saw a friend. I hung out with people, like-minded people. So yeah, I feel like the pandemic really put the spotlight on loneliness, and of
Totally.
course, a lot of young adults are realizing like, oh, like I'm not as connected as I want to be. But this is something that I feel like we've already been kind of going through, just not labeling it appropriately, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that the pandemic just showed us how disconnected we can be in society. We keep advancing with technology, but sometimes it puts us even further apart than from the people that matter. Because you'll be in a room and there's people on their phones, yet they're there together, and maybe they hadn't seen each other all day. So, but I think it just comes back to our own responsibility to like find ways to connect with the people that we care about and are in our lives, and not let all these tools kind of get in the way.
And I think that's a really good point. So I think even generationally, like we're experiencing it more, and young adults, which are our generation and younger, millennials and younger, are experiencing a lot of loneliness more than the other generations because we're kind of disconnected. Even though all these tools are meant to connect us and they're great at helping us reach people we wouldn't otherwise reach, like online through support groups or social media in general and networking, but they also distance us because we're talking to each other in a non-human way, right? Through messaging, through quick text, quick email. So we're missing a lot of that physical contact. But I wanted to ask you, what has been your experience now that you're like, oh, like pandemic wise, like I'm experiencing loneliness or this is what's happened to me? Like, what's been your journey with loneliness?
I've dealt with it for a while. I think it's just something that has affected me because of just kind of my own decisions, maybe of like being a go-getter, being too busy, and kind of thinking, well, I have to focus on this goal, and it means moving everybody and everything to the side, which has consequences because later you feel like crap. You're like, oh, well, people aren't calling me, and a lot of it has to do with were you there with reaching out to them, and if you weren't, then that's what could be the contributing reason why you feel like that. So I've just had issues. I mean, I grew up close to my family back in Washington State, so moving away from them, many times I feel like people grow up and stay where they grew up, so they maybe don't relate to that. But any of us that have moved from state to state or across the country, like in my situation, that bond that was there before kind of gets disrupted, and you just have to find ways to work with that. But that's been, I think, a big issue is just feeling lonely of like my parents and my siblings. I always have you on the side, what I'm very grateful for, but it's just you need to have different groups of family, right? You have your spouse, you have your siblings, you have friends. So if one of those categories isn't, it's kind of isn't met or is empty, that's where loneliness can kind of creep in, and it's really like the gap between where you want the relationship to be at and where it's currently at. So, what about in your experience?
Yeah, I think for me, without even recognizing it, I've been pretty lonely throughout different periods of my life. Same to you. Like, obviously, we're married and, we're happy together, but there were periods where we experienced kind of both of us, like loneliness even within the marriage. But I do reflect and I think, like, even though, like, yeah, I'm very introverted, I enjoy my alone time. I mean, we all still need human connection, but a lot of times, out of like fear and like social anxiety or just not knowing how to start new friendships or feeling just kind of uncomfortable in social settings, like I created kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy of being the loner or being alone or not knowing how to connect with people and then feeling awkward and therefore not putting myself out there. So yeah, I've had my ups and downs with feeling lonely and feeling disconnected and then feeling connected again. But that actually made me think about how in society, like we don't really have structures in school systems, in our places of employment, and I don't know, in other areas of our life. Like we don't have these kind of networks or safety nets to kind of catch people when they're feeling disconnected, to help them come back and feel connected. Like we don't really have a good vetting system. Like we can tell when someone's depressed, maybe a little bit, and we can ask them, how they're doing. But otherwise, like when you go see the doctor, for example, like there's no question about like how connected do you feel to people. Like there's no assessment. And even as within the mental health realm, yeah, like sometimes, in our general assessment, we'll ask like, how's your social network? Because
Mhm.
it's key, right? But at least like in the physical sense and in other practices, it's not the norm to ask how connected we are to one another. And I think that just points out how huge of an issue this is. And I don't know, it's something definitely that our society has to work on.
Yeah, I mean those positive social connections are just so important because they can affect so much of your physical health that we don't consider. I know at times when I'm lonely, I can either go grab something to eat or maybe go grab a beer or something, and obviously those things aren't helping me on a physical level, right? And it's really a way to distract myself from that loneliness. So
Awesome.
I know in the episode we talk about different examples, like myself, of what I do when I feel lonely, and I feel like these examples are common to other people. So it's really understanding loneliness itself, and then also what it could lead into, because we just think of loneliness as kind of black and white, like I'm lonely or I'm not. But in the episode, we talk a lot about the different scenarios you could be in that people still experience loneliness, even when being around of a lot of people. So, what do you think are some ways to day-to-day things people can do to fight the loneliness if they're feeling, if someone's watching right now and feeling it?
I think first is just taking action. So even if you feel like you moved to a different city, you don't know anybody there, I mean, try to reconnect with the peers or the friends or family members that you have, back home or even online. Like we're not discounting online. Like online, you can form real friendships, and so there is a sense of community too. Like talking to people online, but taking action towards trying to address it because it's a vicious cycle of you feel lonely, you don't connect with people, you feel insecure, you feel like fear of rejection, even to some extent. But yeah, definitely taking action, however small, to try and connect with someone again. And then also like practicing gratitude, I think could be really helpful because we tend to like underestimate our current relationships and like take them kind of for granted sometimes. So practicing gratitude of how lucky you are to have what you do have in terms of your family, your friendships, and trying to like reignite appreciation for those people despite some of the barriers or some of the annoying things that they
Mhm.
might have or the things that you struggle to accept about them. So yeah, I think practicing gratitude, taking a step towards reconnecting. And I mean, worst case scenario, not worst case scenario, but I think like a more difficult, challenging kind of step would be to put yourself out there and try to maybe join like a group around a specific topic that you're interested in. That might be like a safe area to like try and connect with people, a book club, a French club if you like speaking French like myself. Anything that comes to mind that you enjoy. Honestly, like the meetup groups, now they're online, given the pandemic, a lot of them are online. So finding something that you value that's important to you and trying to connect with people that have that same interest, that have that same value. Another one that just came to mind is like a support group, not a support group, but a youth group or like a group through your church or through your faith. Anything to find connection with other people for sure. But we definitely want to encourage you guys to check out the podcast. Let us know what you think. Give us any feedback as far as like maybe what we missed or some tips and tricks that you do to try and like keep yourself more connected to your loved ones and your friends.